Hi, welcome back. In this in this grammar point, we're going to talk about measure words. Now, what are measure words? Good question. A measure word is a word that we actually have them in English. Let me give you an example. 3 pieces of cake. 3 pieces of cake. The word pieces is a measure word. We're talking about what we're measuring. So 3 pieces of cake, or we could say 3 slices of cake, and that's different from 3 cakes, right? So in English, we have these measure words that come between a number and a noun. So if we want to count a noun, we need to have a measure word in Chinese. Basically, all nouns will have measure words. And so in English, you only use a measure word when you need to clarify. Like 3 cakes means a whole cake, but 3 pieces of cake refers to pieces. So in English, we only use the measure word when we need to clarify information, whereas in Chinese, basically every noun has a measure word. The so Also, we'll learn more about this later. Demonstrative pronouns such as this, that, and which, in Chinese, 这, 那, they also carry measure words, but that's for another day. Just like piece, dozen, and rolls in English, many measure words in Chinese include information clarifying something about the noun. For example, there's a measure word 张, which is usually used for things that are flat, like a picture or a table or a bed. So it gives you a little clue about the kind of noun that's coming after it. And so many of the measure words include some of that kind of information. Another fact about measure words is that when we're counting something, so when there's a measure word after a number, like one person, here we have it, 一个人, 一个人, one, 一个人, 个 is a measure word, 一个人. When the number is 2, so here we have 一二, right? The number for 2 is 二. But when the number 2 is followed by a measure word, it actually changes to a different word. It is 两. So it's 两个人. That would be 2 people here. 两个人 or 两个苹果. That's 2 apples. 两个苹果. So that's a little bit annoying and difficult to get used to. Why are there 2 numbers for the number 2? I don't know, but that's the way it goes. When you're counting a number, just counting it's 一二三 1 2 3. But when it's talking about you're counting nouns with a measure word, then it's 两个苹果. Or 两张床, that'd be 2 beds. Okay, so that's a little rule there. And now I'm going to talk about a very common measure word called 个. That's 个, not G, 个. Often said as a measure word, it's often said as a neutral tone. So this is the most common measure word. It is the correct measure word for lots of nouns, and I'll talk about some of them right now. But it is also the measure word you use when you can't think of the right one. So it's kind of like the default measure word. So let's say I want to say bed, but I don't know the measure word for bed. It should be 一张床, 1张, 一张床. That's the right, 张 is the right measure word, but I can't remember that, so I say 一个床. And in this case, it might sound a little bit less educated or whatever, but it gets the point across and there's no misunderstanding because there can only be one bed. We're not talking about slices of beds. So it will be very clear. And so it's kind of a very handy little word to know because it really helps you when you need a measure word, but you don't remember the right one, you default to 个. But here are some cases in which it's actually the right measure word for this noun. 一个人, that means one, 一个人. 个 is 4th tone, but again, it becomes neutral tone when it's a measure word. But because it was originally 4th tone, the E changes to 2nd tone. Does that make sense? Because it would have been 一个. So 一个人, that's one person. 两个苹果, 2 apples. So 个 is the right measure word for apple. So if you want to count apples, it's 个. 一个苹果, 两个苹果, 三个苹果. Let's see what else I wanted to say about 个. 个 is used for people, like here it's 人, but if it's friend, 三个朋友, 3 friends. Can I say 三个朋友们? No, because the word 3, the sangha also already includes the information that there's more than one, so we can't have the mun there. It's too redundant. Remember that? Okay, that's all for this point. Now I'm going to teach you another measure word that's really important to know, and it is the measure word for age, to talk about how old something is or someone is. So here we have the measure word is sui. This is the character sui. So the formula to say the age of someone or something is the name or the thing plus the number, so that's the plus the measure word. And so this is, if we want to say, by the way, that there's probably like an understood noun here, but this functions as a measure word and the noun is kind of left off. Maybe the understood noun would be something like years or something, years of age, but it's not said, it's not spoken. So it's the name or the thing plus number plus, so I am 41, almost 42. 我, that's I, 41, that's the number, 岁, so name, number, 岁. You'll notice that there's no 是. In English we say I am 42 years old. But in Chinese there's no to be verb. It's just I, 42 岁. So 我41岁. Did I say 42? 41. 我41岁. So if we want to say a child is 2 years old, what's the number how do we say 2 when there's a measure word? It's 两岁. 他2岁. He or she is 2 years old. 他2岁. 我宝宝1岁. My baby is 1 years old. So now I want to teach you how to ask someone's age. So unfortunately in Chinese there are lots of ways to ask people their age, and it kind of depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a young child, you say it one way. If you're talking to someone who's a peer, you say it another way. If you're talking to someone who's older or much older, you can say it other ways that are more respectful. So I can't go into all that. You're just beginning, but I'll teach you kind of the most generic way to ask somebody's age, excuse me. It's this: 你今年多大? So it actually doesn't have the word sui in it. It literally means you this year, 你今年多. It means how big. This is 多 means how. So how big? This year, how big? And then the answer would be 我 number 岁. So 你今年多岁? 我今年41岁. Continuing with the measure word theme, I want to teach you how to ask the question, how many of a noun? So how many people are coming tonight? Something like that. So the formula is the word how many plus the measure word. We still need the measure word and then the noun. So the problem is there are two different words in Chinese for how many, and maybe that's not a problem. It's just exciting possibilities, y'all. So we have ji right here. This is a very small little word that means how many, and you ask it when you expect the answer to be relatively small, like 1 to 9, or I said more or less because something like that. You expect the number to be small, and so you can use the word ji to say how many. So if I want to say this sentence right down here, I didn't write the pinyin, but it's 几个人要来. It's it's ji, how many, 个 measure word, 人 people will come or want to come. 几个人要来. That's how many. But there's another word, a more generic word for how many, that's duōshǎo. Here's the characters, duōshǎo. Shao can be said with in neutral tone, so duōshǎo or duōshǎo. Duōshǎo or duōshǎo 都可以. They're both fine. So 多少 is how many. So 多少 can be used in a much more generic way. It can mean how many about any number, including small or huge. But it can also be used for uncountable things to say how much. So if I want to say how much water, I can say 多少水. But in that case, I'm not going to use a measure word because a measure word is for counting. And water, as a unit of water, it's not countable. You talk about volume. It's how much water, and so it's not a countable noun. So you say 多少水, not 多少个水. how many waters. Does that make sense? And so duōshǎo can mean how much for uncountable things. It can also mean how many with a measure word. The measure word in this phrase when you're using duōshǎo can actually be dropped. So it's actually optional when you're using duōshǎo, but it is not optional when you're using ji. So a little confusing, but remember the basic pattern for asking how many for countable nouns, and you'll be all set. The fact that you can drop it with duōshǎo is kind of an extra that you don't need to remember right now. So how many people? 几个人要来 or 多少个人要来